All right, everyone. It looks like there's still hope for peace and finally an end to lingering disputes in Korea, but there's another part of Asia where there's a disputed border between three nations, and a lot of people have actually died in the process of the various disputes and incursions there, and that's the area where Pakistan, India, and China meet, that general region. There's a vast area of land there that's variously claimed by the three nations in different portion. And so basically it's a tale of, hey, if your troops are in the area unopposed, basically you run that hillside. Beyond that is China, even if the border isn't finalized and it's technically claimed by two other states. That is, they all came in and occupied different chunks of this gigantic area, which is fairly enormous. It's larger than some of the smaller countries in the world. I believe that the area is actually technically quite vast, although the de facto area that they disagree over is a little bit different. It's a smaller portion. It's probably the size of Macedonia or something. But it could start a nuclear war. You've got three nuclear states. Secondary nuclear states, admittedly, China, Pakistan, and India, they're closer to like France or the UK in their stockpiles than they are to the US or Russia. That being said, they certainly collectively have enough military capabilities to destroy one another and cripple themselves back to the Stone Age in an atomic exchange. The problem is that you've had no concerted effort, as far as I know of in recent modernity, by anyone outside of those three nations that don't seem to get along very well to actually finalize this border dispute. The other problem is that because of certain tribalistic warfare situations there, even if you did, it's likely there would still be incursions. So what you get are these situations where, like, you'll have a Pakistani border outpost. The Indian army doesn't recognize it as being in Pakistan at all, and they'll, fire a few shots at it. Sometimes there's a live fire. They'll fire off an artillery shell. Sometimes somebody gets sniped. Sometimes somebody gets kidnapped, basically held for ransom. So these three militaries are constantly egging one another on. That form of antagonism, unfortunately, keeps the situation in that region inflamed as opposed to maybe finalizing the border and realizing, hey, ultimately we save so much money and generate so much more wealth even if we think that we're technically giving up land. Like, you'd think the easiest thing to do would be, hey, the long-term, or at least long-ish term, areas that are held respectively by these three militaries should just become the new border. The further area that all three of them fully claim and operate with semi-impunity in, which is a rather large area too, that should be split up those three ways exactly evenly. Of course, then you'd have probably a decade-long dispute over where those lines should be drawn anyway. Everyone would want the best hillsides, the best little miniature valleys in between them with the best farming opportunities. And this is an economically important zone, especially on the Indian side of the border. We're talking an area that's rich in silk and certain agricultural goods, good soil, very fertile, rather temperate as opposed to maybe the southern end of India where it's constantly rainy and it gets up to 120 degrees and kills a bunch of people. That this is an economically important zone enough for three major world militaries, which is what they are. They've all got nuclear weapons backing them to fight over. Every time someone dies, therefore, you have potentially a problem. Now, it's not just there. The whole area along the Chinese border has the same problem. The Vietnamese border, Vietnam keeps an inordinate number of troops up near the Chinese border for a very good reason. They've gone to war before in recent history. While they were both run by communism, a lot of people don't even know that Vietnam went to war with communist China back, I think it was in the late 70s or early 80s, over the Pol Pot issue, among other things. They thought that they were incurring into one another's diplomatic territory. By the way, it was a de facto Vietnamese victory. Vietnam does pretty well in modern warfare, all things considered. They were outnumbered and outgunned, and they still beat the shit out of the Chinese troops, possibly because a lot of them were impressed into service. I don't think wanted to fight. And then they fought again, I think more recently actually, and they constantly have naval incursions. So the maritime borders are all fucked. And keep in mind one thing. When we're talking about Pakistan and India, we're talking about post-colonial border redrawing. That didn't always make full sense, and of course is going to be used by nationalists as well as people who have more theocratic views, both within the realm of Indian Hinduism and the realm of Pakistan and Islam, backed by the Middle East at large, the Saudis. China comes in. They wanted imperialism, actually. They still hold Tibet for a reason. So you have a screwy border situation here, but it's not even like Well, the Western countries came in by force, redrew everything, and fucked around. It was more a partition along ethnic and religious lines thereafter, which long term kind of did make sense. But then you've got Modi and some of his nationalists. I'm sure that there will come a time in which, if things remain inflamed there, you're going to go from the nationalism of people like Modi to a post-nationalist imperialistic outlook. That's the necessary cycle that will be in place if that stressor remains. What you could end up is basically a bunch of people calling for invasion on one side or the other. Then they will notice that you have hundreds of nuclear weapons and maybe think twice about it. Like, isn't India's main type of nuclear missile, isn't it called the Shiva missile, like the destroyer and crazy shit? It's like Russia has the Satan missile, which has, I think, 8 warheads. Basically half the size of the Tsar Bomba and its blast yield. That'd be pretty bad. Wipe out all of New York City in a single hit. It's not like the weapons of yesteryear where you have one relatively small crater in Hiroshima. It's more like, hey, half of Japan just disappeared into the ocean. No, you'd have a little bit of a problem if there was a war there, but Trump should, I think, get involved. Looking to his success in Korea, he's in a unique position to actually aid this process. He gets along fairly well with Jinping. He gets along fairly well, it seems, with Modi. India doesn't really want to be part of BRICS. That's potential Western leverage. And Pakistan has been reliant on the U.S. government for aid in a military sense for a long time. And we have influence with Saudi Arabia. It is possible, I think, to solve parts of the border dispute there and try to ease tensions so that there's one less possible flashpoint that could cause a nuclear war. Ultimately, though, it's really between India and Pakistan over their long simmering border dispute more than anything else. But China having troops wandering around in some of those mountain ranges that are additionally claimed, that could be a bigger flashpoint because China has shown more willingness, it seems, to go toe-to-toe with other states with regards to border disputes. If we look at the Spratlys, like, they haven't fired on our naval vessels, but they did basically threaten to respond. They did say this is now ours because we have piled sand and gravel onto some coral reefs and built a little base there. Now they're claiming, of course, that the entire region of the South China Sea belongs to China, which of course is not recognized by any other nations in the world, although it's recognized by China, and they think that that's the only thing that matters. That's about all. Peace out.